Hi, I'm Dorothy Dent, and today we're going to paint a pumpkin board. This will be a really neat addition to your fall decorations. I think you'll like it. I'm painting on a canvas. This is a 12 by 16 canvas, so mine's not on a board, but here's what the board looks like. So this is the painted board, and you can see it has the word pumpkins at the bottom, and this is embossed down in the wood, and so it makes a really nice little piece to display your pumpkins on there. So that's kind of a fun thing. But for the purpose of the class and the demo, I'm just going to work on the canvas. Let's talk about the brushes you're going to need today. So with a fairly large brush here, I'm going to use this for my sky and some other things. This is my small background brush. It's a bristle brush. It's about a size 6. And then let's go to also a bristle is a fan brush. This is my fan brush. It's about a size 4. And then small brushes are real important for all the detail. And I've got, this is a little small detail flat. It's got a nice sharp chisel edge. That's good. And if you have one a little bigger, this is my detail, and it's a size 8. You can lay both of those out if you have both. And also, you're going to need a liner. This is just a little number 1 liner, so that would be good for your little limbs and tiny things. So, as well as brushes, we need some paint, of course. So, here's my palette for today, and I'm starting with white, and this one is cad yellow medium. This is yellow ochre, cadmium orange. This one's burnt sienna. We have raw umber, ultramarine violet, and Payne's gray. These are Permalba colors by Martin Weber. Colors change a little bit from brand to brand, so this is the brand of paint I'm using, and it gives you nice bright colors. And then you need some medium. I've got a little bit of medium in a cup here that I'm going to use. This is liquid glaze, and it's also a Martin Weber product. And then you need some brush cleaner out. Just some kind of odorless brush cleaner is what you're going to need for cleaning your brushes, and some paper towels, and maybe some handy wipes or some wet ones or something to clean your hands along as you go, because sometimes we get paint on ourselves. So, okay, I think we're about ready to start. Okay, I'm going to start with the sky, and so I'm picking up white and move it over here to an open place on your paper there where you can mix, and then take just a little touch of yellow ochre. It's not going to take a lot. That's your darker yellow, and just kind of brush mix it so that you get kind of a nice soft yellowish white. And I'm going to pick up just a little touch of medium, not too much, especially if you're working on the board. It's not as absorbent as the canvas. I'm going to start up here to the top, and we're just going to paint the sky. Be sure and have your pictures out where you can see where you're going with this. Okay, you're just kind of going back and forth with these strokes, just little back and forth strokes. And when you come down to the trees, you're going to go around your trees. And you just kind of remix your colors, just going back into your white and yellow. Colors don't have to be exactly the same. Skies are never all one color. We're going to be putting other colors in here in a minute anyway. But come down, you got that little wiggly line top of your trees, come across it just a little bit. Because your trees are going to grow anyway when we put those on. They're going to grow just a little. Because we kind of stretch them out. Get over here on the other side of the big trees. You can add just a tiny little bit of orange in with your yellow ochre and white, where the color looks a little bit more orangey over there on that side, on the left side of the trees. Let's put just a little bit of orange in there. Okay, I'm picking up a lot of orange in here in the middle with your white. And you want enough color here that it's going to make a pretty sky. Don't be too skimpy with your colors. A little heavier paint's prettier. That gives you more just more color in there. So I said something about not too much paint, but I think everybody put on too small amount. So, and right here, this is not a separate tree. I was looking at those lines and thought it was a separate tree, but it's two small trees there. So I'm just going to paint across it. I can still see some of the pattern line back in there anyway. So they're just little branches and tiny little limbs up through there. So that's all we need. So anyway, I'm going ahead and put more orangey white down in here. And up in here can be some as well. So then we'll be ready in a few minutes to put in the little low area where the sunset is. But go ahead and get some of the orange, get all the way down to the trees right in there is fine. Okay, that's a pretty good start. Okay, as I work more orange in here, now this is cadmium orange I'm picking up, just a little heavier with the cadmium orange, and still have some white, of course, in your brush. And that makes it look like you've got some nice sunset patterns in there. And then down toward the bottom, where I've already put a little bit of the orangey white, I'm going to kind of wipe the brush and pick up a little bit of yellow medium and white. That's your bright yellow. And there's going to be a little of that kind of right above the tree line down here. We're going to get it just a little lighter, where the sunset is just now going down behind the trees. So put in that yellow white and then soften it up into the orangey. So you've got a nice little glow up there. And sometimes I might pick up just a touch more white and just do a few little scoots in there, but don't get it too white. It's already fairly light. But right above the tree line, I put just a little bit, just a little dab of white, like that's your sun, where it's just barely above the trees to see it. Just a little bit on the corner of the brush, right on top of the yellow. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit, and we'll stop there. Now, when we do these trees, if you lose that area, we'll just put it in again, because we might lose it. The trees have to grow just a little bit. Maybe I'll come up just a little higher with it right now, just in case we do lose some of the bottom portion. Yeah, that's better. Just kind of tap it in, and kind of thick paint tapped in, and scoot it just a little bit to the side, and that gives you your little shiny area where the sun is. And that should be enough for the sky. Okay, we've got our sky pretty well done. That doesn't mean we can't come back and touch it up a little bit if you see something you want to change, but we'll move on down and paint these real distant background trees that's coming in here, and there's going to be a little of them over on the other side of the big tree. And this is a mixture. It's going to be a kind of violet mixture. I'm going to start with a little Payne's Gray and white. So you can pick up, actually I guess you can pick up the white first and then just a little bit of Payne's Gray. And mix kind of a soft gray whites. Payne's Gray is a blue. It looks blue. So as I mix this color, see, I'm going to see a blue, white, Payne's Gray. If your color's too dark to begin with, stretch it out on your palette and add more white to it to lighten it up. And then get just a little touch of violet. There's some violet in this to make it look real soft and hazy and distant. But I think that color's still a little on the dark side. I'm going to add a little more white and pull it kind of off to the side. When you need to add more white to lighten something, rather than putting it right in the middle of the whole pile, just pull some of the paint off to the side and lighten that portion. And that way you don't have to waste so much white trying to get the whole thing light, because we really don't need that much of the paint anyway. So it's Payne's Gray and violet in your white, and then test your color. Come in and test it against your sky. I'm still just a little bit too blue. I want some more violet in there. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more and see how I'm working it in over here to the side edge. So it's a little more purple. And then I'm tapping, that color's better. I'm tapping with the corner of the brush. We're going to come down to over to the building, and we're coming down to this bottom line. I'll just sketch a little line there so we kind of know where we're going, and on the other side of the tree, same thing. Hold your brush vertical. I mean, you can turn it this way and that, but hold it so you're working on the side of the brush, and it's a little tapping motion. Sometimes I may need just a little bit of medium in there too to make it work a little better. So I'm tapping it in. Still want just a little touch more violet in there with my white. You want to keep your value fairly light because that's going to look distant, very, very distant. Still a little bit dark. It's hard to get it light enough. I'm wiping the brush out and putting this little, picking up just a little straight white. You can adjust your colors right on the canvas by just picking up more of whatever color you think you need. In my case, I need just a little bit more white in here. And just put straight white over what's on your canvas, and that lightens it. So I do a lot of color mixing right on the canvas by adjusting color. Try to get this uneven up here. These are background trees kind of silhouetted against that sky. And so if you can get them uneven, that's going to look more natural. And there's a few places here that's going to get a little bit more dark in there. And as I move on over here, let's continue on with some of the light lavender blue toward the top. And then we're going to add a little bit darker in the bottom in a minute, but let's get this worked in for the tops of the trees first. And then we'll come back to the bottom portion and darken it just a little more. After you've got this purple kind of established, we want a little bit of darker values down here at the base of these trees, just something a little bit darker. Dark colors are really, really strong, and doesn't take very much to make it darker, but I'm going to pick up just a little touch of burnt sienna with my dirty brush and tap that in. See, that'll kind of mix right on your surface there, just a little sienna. And work toward the bottom of these trees and up in them just a wee bit. You don't want to pound them until you get them looking just flat. Don't pound anyway. It's a light touch. Sometimes people tend to have a heavy hand. But it doesn't take very much paint or very much pressure. But we want to get it a little darker down there just for some depth in the trees. Makes it look like you've got deeper shadows down there. So we're just tapping that in, and like I said, up over the blue a little, but don't take all the blue away. Still leave some of your violets. And over here, this is too shallow in the middle there. It's fine. I wouldn't need any dark. I'll put just a little bit of dark over here next to the building. Your building there is going to be a little bit light, I think. We've got some highlights on the building, so I'll work a little bit of dark against the building. You're always wanting to look at putting darker values against lighter values. That's what makes things look shapely and brings out your textures. You want a dark, medium, and light value in nearly everything you paint. So there's my trees. See, they're a little darker at the bottom, lighter, got the lavender at the top, and they're uneven. That's what we're looking for. And you could come back if you happen to lose some of your white, that little spot of light down there, I could come in with a little flat brush and put some back in. This can be heavy too. I mean, it needs to be kind of thick in order to show up. So I'm going to put just a little bit more back in over the trees, right in through there where it might show. You could do the same thing with more yellow white. Just whatever you feel like you'd like to do to brighten up that little spot back there where your sun's going down. Okay, that's it. Okay, let's move our to over here on behind the barn for our trees, and there is going to be some of this lavender over there first. I'm not going to fill in the whole tree area with it, but go ahead and use some of the same general colors. This is your blue and lavender mix again, Payne's gray. Same colors we were using over on the other side. If anything, you could go just a little hair darker. And I'm going to start kind of back in here to the back of the barn. Work on, again, the side of the brush. Remember to work on the side so you get this little interesting uneven pattern of leaves up there in the trees. And then I'm going to put a little bit right against the building as it comes down. There's going to be some color right in there that's lavender. Cool colors like lavenders and blues say distance. You can look at those colors and feel like you're seeing something farther away. And that's kind of what we want on the back side of this bigger tree here. A little shadowy looking, cooler colors. Well, maybe just about that much for right now.
What colors are we using there?
Okay, this is Payne's gray and violet, your ultramarine violet, with just a little bit of white in it. Kind of the same general mix we started out with over here, maybe just a little bit more lavender. Payne's gray, ultramarine blue, or ultramarine violet, I mean, and white. A little bit of white, not too much. Put all that worked in there, right there. Okay, after you've got about this much of your purpley blues in there, we're going to come in with some darker values. I'm going to pick up, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the raw umber and maybe a little touch of Payne's gray. We just get something pretty dark in here. I don't think you need anything, maybe just a little touch of yellow ochre. So it has a little bit of a greenish, black greenish look there. But again, we want it to look quite dark. So that would be, again, Payne's gray and a little bit of the raw umber. Maybe just a tiny touch of yellow ochre. But this is going to look dark when you put it on. So this is a base coat that's going to be on these big tall trees. Again, work on the bottom corner, the side of the brush, and you're going to get a dark base coat in, and you're going to overlap a little bit of the purple, so don't just stop when you come to the lavender purple blue there. You can put a little bit of the dark foliage over it, but just try not to lose it. Raw umber, Payne's gray, tiny little touch of yellow ochre is okay. And the outside edges of these now, kind of keep your brush where it's pointing toward the outside edge as you tap this in. That makes it a little easier to get that lacy look. Now this won't really look real green. We still have a highlight color to put on top. This is still a base coat. You've got to get your darks down first with oil paint. And this foliage comes on out. In fact, it's going to cap it around the peak of the roof there just a wee bit. A little lighter in values can be worked in on the outside edges of your foliage, because that's usually where it's a little lighter, because your light's shining through the trees, and the trees are not as heavy, the leaves aren't as heavy along the outside edges. So I'm coming over to the peak of the roof and then down the side just a little bit. And then I'm coming in behind the barn when we get this done right in here. Getting a little base coat on there. And then I'm going to skip the lavender, so some of it's still going to show. Part of it anyway, and then again come into the back with your same dark value. Payne's gray, raw umber, touch of yellow ochre occasionally. So although I'm kind of working over the lavenders, I'm trying real hard not to lose all of it. dry, dry. And so the foliage really is not over the back of the building, so I'm going to paint right up to the building. A little area there where I'm going to tap some more blue in there just a little bit. And then we'll come down to where the line is out on the ground. And that's where we'll stop. So this foliage comes just a little bit below the building. There should be a mark there on your pattern where it will stop. All this back in here is pretty dark. You can, if you want it darker, pick up more Payne's gray. That's better than getting it too brown. You got to watch the raw umber. If you get too much raw umber in there, it starts looking brown, and then it starts looking like it's dying because it's brown. To correct it, just tap more Payne's gray in if you get that situation going on. A little bit more purple in there in a couple of places. I'm about to lose all my purple that I put in there so carefully. So I could tap a little more lavender in there. With lavender and white, I'll bring violet and white a little bit more in. That's pretty good for a base, I think, except I'd like to get this a little taller right up here. I want that tree a little higher. Probably tall enough. Maybe a little bit higher over here. Because if we were working on the board, we had to add a little bit of height to our sky here because the board was a little bit more narrow, so that makes our trees need to grow just a little bit here so we can have more trees and maybe not as much sky back there. So that should be fine, just like that. Okay, we've got our base coat on our foliage, so now we need some light leaves on here, and I'm going to use my fan brush for these, I think. And when you load your fan brush, it's important to load it correctly for the foliage. I'm going to use some yellow and some yellow ochre here, a little bit of white, so it's kind of a soft color. And I'm loading my brush like I'm pushing away from me. Now I'm right-handed, of course, so I'm going to go this way. And then when I turn the brush over, the paint's on the top right corner of the brush, like that. Okay, now the light in the painting, well, the light is actually coming from the middle of the picture this time, so where your sun is. So on these trees it would be on the left side. So I'm taking the corner of the brush and just tapping. I push up just a little bit, set the brush down and give it a little bit of an upward push. Don't flip up, but just lean the brush over a bit. And that releases the paint and puts the highlights on the tree. It's a little bit of a tricky stroke, but it works well once you get the hang of it. And just remember, your paint is on the top of the brush, and you're working groupings of foliage rather than, you don't want to just jump all around. So you want to think of this as a group of foliage. And I'll reload all the time, and then I'll leave some dark in between the groups. And then I come in and I create another group of foliage and allow some dark to be in between before I put another group of foliage. So you work little highlighted leaves on the edges of the groups. And I have to keep enough paint on the brush. I'm reloading there as I go down. and I get more paint. And you can kind of turn your brush this way and that, but just remember to kind of keep that paint pushed out toward the light direction, toward the left. And this will give you some nice pretty leaves. And back in here where you've got some of those lavender colors, try to leave some of them showing. That adds to the distance in the trees. A little depth back there that's purples or dark values could be. Reload, and then I'll come over here. Some of this is more of the yellows. And you could have more, a little bit of yellow ochre down in here, so everything doesn't have to be a bright yellow. Yellow ochre works well in the shadow areas, especially back behind the building. Let's get some paint in through there. And it's almost going to be enough. You can put in a few little twigs, sticks and twigs if you want. It's usually easier to wait till it dries a little bit to put these in. I'll see if I can get some in right now just to show, but use your liner for those if you have a place for them, and thin the paint with turp. I thin it with turp instead of brush cleaner, instead of medium. So I'm using the brush cleaner instead of medium. And then just a few little twiggies in there, and that makes it look more like a tree. If your foliage is really, really heavy, your twigs probably will not show up. They won't stick until your paint has dried a little bit. So you want to be careful anyway with your twigs that you don't get them real thick and real heavy. What we're looking at here would be toward the top of the trees where your little twiggies are more thin and not so heavy. Okay, we'll just leave about that much for now. Okay, we're going to come down to this little field next, and this is a really small area. When you get over here around the little pumpkins, we don't want to lose the pumpkins, but we will lose the fence. We're coming down here to the bottom of the fence, and we'll end up painting the fence out, but we can put it back in again very easily. So this is just a little field. Looks like the grass is kind of short back here, but we want a little bit of variation of color. I can use this brush in little short patting down strokes. We could also do it with a fan brush, but I think for right now we're going to stick with this flat. It's kind of the same colors you used in the highlights of the trees. I'm going to use yellow ochre and white with maybe a touch of yellow medium in it. But quite a bit of yellow ochre, because especially over here toward the barn, that's a little bit more yellow ochre right in there. With perhaps some white in it, that's a little dark. Yellow ochre and white. Little patting down strokes. Keep on the flat of the brush this time. Little flat of the brush kind of strokes, and come all the way across under the little trees way back in the distance. If anything, you could have a little more white back here toward the trees. Let it recede back into some lighter colors. And I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of burnt sienna in here, especially toward the building. Keep your little strokes just patting, slightly pulling down, not long pulls, just real short. Little touches, tiny. When I say pick up a little burnt sienna, that's just a tiny little touch of it. Tiny, tiny. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna. Little patting strokes, very, very short strokes. Paint the fence out. Right there by the fence, or under the fence, I've actually even got just a tiny little bit of raw umber. Kind of under where the fence will be, there's a little bit of raw umber. And just specks of this paint when I pick it up. Now we're getting over here and we don't want to lose our pumpkins in the wheelbarrow. So very carefully work around the little pumpkins so they won't be lost. And then I'm going to wipe the brush just to remove some of that dark, and then come back in with the white and the yellow for maybe a touch of yellow medium. This is grass, and so you do want some variation of texture and color. When you get the variation of color, it makes it look like there's texture there where there's really not much texture. It's just variation of color. You want to avoid anything that looks like, you know, sudden starts and stops of color. Everything just kind of pats in. A little bit of sienna, a little bit of, I mean, just tiny little bits of this paint's all I'm picking up, so you don't have big, huge colors. They're like big piles of paint. But we want to move over to the other side of the tree. It's the same feel, same colors. And you're going to paint out all those little sticks and twiggy things that was lined up there on your pattern. We'll get rid of them. Some of them may show through the paint, which is fine. That way you can cover them up with your liner later. I can see just a little bit of green over here too, where I've got just a little bit of the Payne's gray in with the yellows. That makes it green. There's a little bit in there, just a tiny bit. You could have a little bit over here too on the other side. That's pretty much all we want right there, except I would like to see just a little bit more of my green color kind of down here toward the bottom of this little area. Now I'll just come on down about to the bottom of the tree trunk right there. There's a little extra greenish color there. Payne's gray, yellow medium, and a little white gives you a greener green. This is kind of behind where there's going to be a lot of the little twigs and sticks and small limbs and stuff. Okay, we'll come about to there. Now, if anything, I might pick up just a little bit more white, like through the center of the field, little white and yellow. I'm going to put that on with my fan brush. I'll just pick up the little fan brush and pat, but just a little bit more in the middle of the field. And that's it. Remember, your green color is your Payne's gray, and yellow medium. It's if you want a brighter green. Okay, there's my little field. Combination of the flat brush and then the fan gives it all the texture that you're going to need, I think. A bit of darker right down there toward the fence. Not quite that dark, but a bit of dark there under where the fence will be. Fence is gone for the moment. Okay. Okay, after you've got your field in, you can come back right now with your little liner and a little bit of raw umber. And don't get your fence too tall, but don't get it too short either. It's probably about half of the height of the first section of the barn, you know, from the floor of the barn there up to that first level where the rock structure is going to be. Your fence is approximately half of that distance, so that'll give you a little reference point there. And the liner, and just kind of space it out, little fence posts. And as some of them lean over a little bit crooked, that even looks better.
What color will you do?
This is raw umber, yeah, just your dark brown. And then they kind of go over here behind the pumpkins. They'll probably get lost back there behind the pumpkins in the wheelbarrow. And then you'll have a couple of little board lines going across. This would be too wide to say it's wire, so we'll say it's a little board fence. And a couple of lines across for that. And and it'll run on over to the edge of the barn and then again disappear behind the pumpkins. So there'll be your fence. Okay, let's go ahead and paint the roof on our building next. If you paint the roof first, then you can set your hand down here in the dry area, which helps quite a bit. So use your detail flat or any little small flat brush that you've got that would be about a size 6 to an 8 probably would be great. We're going to have a lot of different colors on the roof. There's some lot of blue grays. It looks like an old tin roof, so you're going to have a lot of light blue grays to work with, and then some rust colors we'll brush in with our burnt sienna and maybe a little touch of orange or something. But first, look at your background trees and make sure that they're pulled all the way down to the roof line. It's easier to kind of pull them in or check them now than try to get them in there after the roof is painted. And I think mine's okay down there, so I'm going to wipe the brush off and pick up a little bit of white and a touch of Payne's gray. That makes a nice blue-gray. And I'll start kind of over here to the front. I'll test my colors. I think it's a little too dark. In fact, it's quite a bit too dark. So I'm going to come in with more white. I want the top of the roof to be pretty light because it's against dark trees. So we've got to get that light against dark thing going on. So this again is not very much Payne's gray in your white, just enough to make it look a little blue. We're just going to go all the way across the top of the roof. And then when you begin pulling down, which is what you're going to do, go with the slope of the roof. And I'm going to add just a little touch of medium too. Okay, now again, this is white with a little Payne's gray. White and Payne's gray, that makes a little light blue. And we'll get quite a bit of that light blue going on right now. And again, follow the slant of the roof. If you look at the end of the roof, each end of the roof, that shows the slope. And that's the direction you want to go rather than straight down. Got a little bit of violet in the roof. It looks like I've got just a little touch of violet in there too somewhere. A lot of different colors in here. Old tin roofs sometimes have lots of different shades. And again, a little bit of medium. Just pick up a small amount of medium just so the paint will move easier. And we don't really want to blend this too much as far as blending it till it's all one color, because we want all these little different colors going on. But right now, it's either like the lavenders or the blue grays. Blue and white, lavender, a little lavender and white. But you want to see some of the little streaky strokes. Down to the bottom of the roof. Once the blues and the lavenders are in, you can just wipe your brush off. I wouldn't dip it in turp or anything, but just wipe it off and take a little bit of the rust color, your sienna, burnt sienna with just a little touch of orange. It works pretty good too. And get a few little rusty streaks in your roof. Just don't blend them in too much. Blend them a little bit, but not just a whole lot. I'll put just a little bit more white over here toward this peak. Sometimes I'll take my liner and just a little bit of Payne's Gray. You can run some little Payne's Gray lines down like little section lines in the tin. And to make the roof show up just a little bit more, once you get your blue grays in, I'm taking a little bit of the raw umber Payne's Gray mixture, really dark mixture, and go under the roof edge because there's going to be a dark shadow then there anyway. And you can slide up some little tears in the roof, like maybe it was kind of split and torn in a couple of places. Makes it look older. Some little uneven edges at the bottom. And while that dark is in the brush, let's paint in that underneath the overhang of the roof on the other side. That's going to be real dark. Raw umber, Payne's Gray. Okay, there's pretty much our roof there. A little bit of orange in the roof. Okay, with the roof finished, we're going to kind of work on this big flat wall here. It's got a lot of boards on this wall. There's no windows or anything to be a problem going around or anything. So again, we've got this dark under the roof, and I'm going to come back in and pull that dark down just a little bit farther. So that was your Payne's Gray raw umber mixture, and I'm just taking the flat of the brush and tweaking it on down so your shadows are coming down a little bit more so we can catch into them and blend them into the other colors of the wall. So I'm pulling it down like that, and then under here is going to be more of barn boards, and I'm going to clean the dark out of the brush, and I'm picking up burnt sienna. A lot of burnt sienna down here in this wall, and a little bit of raw umber with it in places. But right now I'm just going to take the burnt sienna and kind of work it up and down, and if you see lighter areas where you pull that paint out thinner, you're going to see it look lighter, and that's good. You want that variation, and there's going to be a little bit of yellow ochre in it too. We'll come down to the first line. Don't come all the way. I'll draw a line here because that's where you're going to stop. You're going to stop at the foundation. Burnt sienna with just a touch of yellow ochre. But this is the dark side, so we do want to work some raw umber in it too. So it'll be a little bit darker in a minute. And pull that dark that you put in under that roof, pull it down and let it blend in to whatever your barn board colors are right here. Lose too much of that, we'll put it back in. But again, your main color on this wall is going to be burnt sienna. But I want that streaky look, so it looks like old wood on barn boards. I work on the chisel of the brush more than the flat because that gives it a streakier look. bit of medium keeps the paint moving. If you get it too wet, then it starts lifting the paint and gets too thin and transparent looking. So if it starts doing that, just pick up more paint and less medium. And then I want just a little bit of raw umber in this too. I've got the burnt sienna pretty much all over the barn, some lighter and some darker areas. Now I'm going to pick up just a little bit of raw umber and just streaks in some darker at random areas. It's got a little raw umber, and if you want a little bit of yellow ochre in there as well, that's fine. You can have just, it's this variation of all your nice lights and darks that makes it have that streaky barn board look. I didn't really come in and put actual lines in. You could, you could come in and draw in actual board lines. I just kind of suggested some, without making them too prominent. Be sure it stays dark up there at the top under the roof edge. If you lose the dark, just put it back in. Some of the redder, if you get some redder wide dark areas in there, it kind of looks like cracks in the wood, so that's okay. This is an old building. Okay, so we've got the dark side of the building painted. Now this end piece is quite light in comparison, so we're going to have some lighter values in here. I'll still have a little bit of the raw sienna, but probably not quite so much. A little bit in there, and there's just a little bit of burnt or raw umber it is. A little bit of raw umber in there. I'm going to get right under the roof edge and pull it down. The secret to this side of the building, that real light bright, is because I've fluffed this paint very thin. So you want to use some medium, quite a bit of medium actually. And there's some yellow ochre down here toward the bottom. And again, the paint is put on with a lot of medium, so it's very thin. I'm just going to cover the whole wall. Again, this is very thin paint. I keep stressing that, but it's because I want it thin. Come on down, and I've got a little spot there too where I have to pull my background trees over against the building there. Just kind of tweak them over a little. And with this kind of thin wash of paint on here, I'm just going to leave it real pulled out and real light. Make it look like the light's hitting that side of the building. And then I'm taking just a little bit of raw umber, and I've got a little line that goes across somewhere along in here, kind of from the, just kind of right in this general area here. And then there's like a window here, and I just took a little bit of the raw umber on the brush and just pulled down kind of a little window. Didn't even really clean it off at the bottom. I just let it kind of drag down into the light color, and that's all I did. That side would be done. So again, that was thin paint up here. Raw, there is some raw umber. There's a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit down in here. Then clean the brush and take thinned yellow ochre, finish it off, catch into some of the dark so you get some little streaks in there. Keep it light, and then put your line and your window in with raw umber, and you're done. Okay, we've got our siding done on the barn, so let's come on down now and we're going to do the stone foundation. So I'm going to do a dark base coat. Pick up your raw umber, maybe a touch of your Payne's gray. Use a little flat brush, whatever's a small brush that you were using on your building, whatever that was is fine. Detail flat or small detail, either one. And we're going to do this base coat. We're going to go around the little sign. So when I come to the sign, we're going to work around that. I'll just kind of base it around it now so I won't forget it and paint it out. So there's the sign. You can use a little small amount of medium that will stretch the paint out, make it go a little easier. Don't get so much it thins it to a transparent stage, but just kind of scrub it in. Building's kind of sitting where there's a little hill in front of it, so the angle of the building goes back like this a bit. Front of the barn, I'm going to go ahead while I'm basing in and get a little dark on this side too, on the light side. Go around the door just so we know where it is, because there's not a lot of paint, actually not a lot of wall there to fill in. There's just a little bit. This could be just a little bit lighter than the other side. Kind of hard to see that it's much lighter, but I can tell where the corner is. You just don't want to lose the corner of the building, which is right there. That's where your light's going to change. In fact, I'll just go ahead and start my stonework on this side, and sometimes I actually just like lifted out some of the paint a little bit with a damp brush. You can come in and just erase some. I'll dip my brush in turp and dry it out. And then I can just lift out with the corner of the brush a little bit of area there that'll be little stones. Try to get the light right along that edge. You can put just a little bit of white and maybe a touch of yellow ochre there where you've lifted it out, or maybe you could even put it in without lifting out any paint. So that this side of the wall, of course, is going to be lighter. That's the side the light is hitting on. Don't try to actually build exacting stone shapes. It's just little dabs of paint or little dabs of lifted out paint with the corner of the brush. You can come in and kind of clean it off, and that creates the little stone look too, like I said. But you want your corner to definitely show a light and dark contrast. I'm going to wipe out just a little more right there in the corner. Because if you don't get that light and dark contrast, your building won't look like it's turning, like you've got two sides to it. Then the dark side over there is just going to be a little stones that barely show up. They could be a little blue-gray or anything that's going to show up. Payne's gray and white for your blue-gray, or you could put touches of raw sienna there. We just don't want to get anything real bright on this side. we still want to see that there's some little rocks or stones there. This isn't really a brick foundation. I mean, you could make it brick if you wanted to, but I was thinking more in terms of field stone that just have different shapes. You're going to leave enough dark in between your stones that it makes it look like there's some mortar in there. The blue white or a little bit of the yellow ochre and white, any of that's good for little rocks. Probably enough right there. Okay, after your wall is based in, you got your rocks on there. Let's just go ahead and paint the door, which is very simple. It's just a dark mixture of your raw umber and Payne's gray. So you're going to fill in the door just like a dark opening. Make sure your door is going to stand out against the foundation. It should. But if you feel like you need a little more light on the walls or something to make the door pop out, you can always either add some more light, or wipe out a little bit more of the dark to make it show. And that should finish out our barn. So the barn is done. And the next thing we're going to work on will be our grass and some of this area that's kind of right in here behind the pumpkins. What we're going to do is paint the grass, and we'll work carefully around our pumpkins, and then we'll paint our pumpkins. So that will be our next step, is getting all of this grass, general grass areas in, at least back in here. And then we may stop and work over in here a little bit. We want to get everything worked around our objects, our pumpkins, our wheelbarrow, and all of that before we paint those things. So that'll be next. Okay, we're going to come on down here to our grass area. This is a little bit of a hill. It's kind of in front of the old barn. And we're going to paint the grass very similar to the way we painted it over here on the other side of the building, that background grass back there. Only this field's going to be a little bit greener. So I'm going to use a mix of Payne's gray, a little bit of yellow ochre and white, which will give you a softer green. Yellow ochre and white with a little Payne's gray. And I'm again using the flat of the brush, a little short patting down strokes with the flat of the brush. A little bit of medium in there is going to help you out too. So again, Payne's gray, yellow ochre, a little touch of white. So you've got a light value. We don't want anything that's too dark. And we're going to kind of carefully work around our pumpkins. When you get down to the pumpkins, you may want to change to a smaller brush. I would suggest changing to a smaller brush because it'll be easier. I'll paint the stick out from underneath that little sign. We've got our sign, so it's easy enough to put a stick in to hold it up later. Getting up here against the building, and when I'm getting down here where I'm getting close to those pumpkins, I'm don't want to wipe them out, so I'm going to go to my smaller brush, the little detail flat or the small detail, either one of those. That's a 8 or anywhere from an 8 to a 6 to a 4, something like that on your sizes of brush. And then I'm going to carefully work around the pumpkins, kind of the same general color, but we're just working around them. Shouldn't be too hard, just keep your strokes little short strokes. You don't have to worry about the stems, just work around the round part of the pumpkins. Colors can vary a little bit, but don't circle the paint around them. Keep it little patting down strokes so it looks like it has a little bit of texture. Look at your color. If you think it's too dark, just add a little more white. That's always lightens up the color, is adding white. So it's Payne's gray, a little bit of yellow ochre rather than the bright yellow, and white. And a little medium. As you stop and remix colors from time to time, you should get a little variation in the color, and that's good because grass is never all just one color. It always has light and dark areas in it, and that's what you want it to be. Under these little pumpkins, the grass is going to get just somewhat darker. It'll have just maybe a little bit more Payne's gray in your mixture, so some of it looks more shaded right in under your pumpkins. And after the pumpkins are painted, we'll have to touch our grass up a little more, probably that's underneath them. Try to keep the grass above the pumpkins a little bit lighter with more white in it, and then under the pumpkins it can be a little darker, like they're more in shadow underneath them. That's going to make them look like they're sitting. We can adjust color as needed after we get the pumpkins painted. Now once I get away from the pumpkins, then I'll get a bigger brush, but maybe like right now. So even though this is going in a little darker, I'm still using little short strokes and try to get a little variation to the color. Okay, because I am not working on the board and working on the canvas instead, I added a couple more pumpkins down here, which probably will not be on your pattern, but all you have to do is make some circles, and I overlapped them, and you can add another pumpkin or two because we had more space at the bottom without the lettering on there. Another option would be, if you're working on a canvas, would be to raise the design up just kind of where it would fall naturally on the board. It would leave a strip down here for the word pumpkin, and you could write the word pumpkins in there, and you would still have that if you wanted to make it look like that, or If you don't, then I would suggest adding a couple more or 3 pumpkins down here, because there's a little too much space. You know, without these two, everything would stop up high and all you'd have down here is grass. So it seemed like it needed something more to make it look finished. So we threw in a couple more pumpkins over here, and then I put one more on the other side under where the tree is over there on the other side. But I don't think you'll have any trouble adding more pumpkins if that's what you want to do. Okay, I'm going to move up here in this middle section now while I'm grassing, and this is going to be lighter up here too. So it's got a lot of white in it, some yellow ochre. If you've been using some of the other yellow in there too, you may want a touch of that in here, but come in under the barn and get some lighter values. I've got yellow ochre and white here, and then I'm going to pick up just that little bit of Payne's Gray to make it look greenish. Kind of a soft green. I like the softer greens for fall. Bright yellow greens always look more spring-like, or middle of the summer. And any of the variations of green are still yet good, because, as I said, grass is always different colors. Be very careful around the wheelbarrow. What we really should have done was take like a Sharpie marker and marked off our wheelbarrow, but didn't think about it. But you could still yet do that if you wanted to. Inside the wheelbarrow, inside where the little wires are that run out to the wheels, the little spokes and stuff, just paint it out, but paint it light. Be sure it's the same color you've got over here on the other side of the wheelbarrow. Don't change colors from the inside to the outside of the wheelbarrow wheel. It's got to be the same color of grass. Some little detailed stuff inside this wheel that I am going to paint out. We'll just look at our picture to put it back in so we can get it similar place. But if you go over it with a little fine tip Sharpie marker, then you can always see it through the paint, and that's even a better idea, but it's too late for it now on this one. Bottom of the wheelbarrow is lost in the grass anyway. The grass is up over it, so you don't see the whole wheel. Over there against the tree and around the whole wheelbarrow. Be sure you've got some grass work. And then I can go to a bigger brush. You can even use your fan brush down here at the bottom of the picture if you want to go to your fan brush and work. That would go a little quicker and faster. And I would suggest using just about half of the brush. Your fan brush, most of them are kind of large. Unless you've got a very, very small fan brush, you need to tip it so you're using about half of it, and a little short downward strokes, and then you can come on down to the end of the bottom of the canvas. Then just continuing on now across the bottom of the canvas with a fairly dark value. This again is Payne's Gray and yellow ochre, and maybe just a little bit of white. But the more little downward strokes that show up, you know, light against dark and so forth, makes it look grassy. That's what we're looking for, is grassier little strokes to the foreground, and then back in the distance it can be lighter and less texture. You see more texture of grass close to you. The farther away it is, you see color, but you don't see grass blades as such. So. The medium is very helpful too. Don't forget to pick that up. The paint will get so dry you can't hardly move it if it doesn't have a little bit of medium in it. It's a little darker over here around this tree. That would be a little more in the shadows. Even little bits of raw umber can be worked in some of these dark areas over here. That wouldn't hurt a thing to have a little bit of the brown tones in there. This area is getting a little bit small for my fan brush, so I'm going to switch to go back to my bristle brush, the small background brush, kind of work in some of these smaller areas here. Okay, I'm getting some pretty good darks and light areas over here in the shadows, so I'm about to get to the point where I think my grass is covered. Takes a little while to get it all in. But I think we're in pretty good shape for right now. Can always add a little bit more texture later. And some little leaves or bits of color down toward the bottom with maybe touches of orange or something like that can be worked in, but we'll get our pumpkins painted first and work all of that detail in. And then decide if we need some more texture and color in the foreground beyond what we've got now. So this is a good place to quit on the grass, I think, for now. Okay, we've got our grass kind of blocked in, and you know, you do want to build your grass texture up to where you've got darker values down across the front, and then you've got lighter values toward the back, and that's going to give it all kinds of depth in there, where your eyes tend to skip over the dark area and go back into the light area. Light always attracts your eye, so you want lighter values back in here, and that pulls your eye in and creates perspective. Okay, we're going to paint this little sign next. It's just a small sign, so you want a small flat brush, like your little number 4 flat would be good. And I'm going to pick up white with just a little bit of raw umber, so it's not real white, but it's still pretty pale. Gives it kind of a gray white color. And just fill it in. And you may be able to write your lettering on it if you are careful. If you can't get it to stick, just let it dry and then come back and get it. But I'm gonna put lettering on with kind of a mixture of burnt sienna and orange. Should give you kind of a reddish color. And it says 5 cents pound. So there's your little sign. And then we've got to stick it into the ground with a little burnt umber post that kind of goes sideways, a raw umber post. And then I'm going to put just enough kind of dark green under it to make it look like you've got some little weeds or something right in through there. So it looks like it's down in the ground in the grass. And I'm just kind of softening those little weeds on out a little bit further. There's your little sign. You could put just a little highlight, maybe of white, down the side of the post if you want, or you can just leave it dark. Either way. So there's your sign. Okay, let's move over to the other side of the canvas now, and we're going to paint this big tree and some of the other little limbs and so forth. Use your small brush again, because we have some small areas to fill in. I'm going to go under the umbrella with my raw umber and come down into the grass. Got that little bitty bit of the tree right in there. And then I'm going to skip over the support, the legs of the wheelbarrow. And we'll come on over in here. All nice and dark back in there. Even a little bit of Payne's Gray wouldn't hurt in there, because it's really quite dark under the wheelbarrow. It would be in the shadows anyway. Just come right up exactly to those legs, so you don't have a lot of space in there you didn't fill in that should have been. And this tree just kind of fades down into the grass too, just kind of fades in. We might put a little bit more grass up over it after a while. And then very carefully I'm going to work around the wheelbarrow right in here at the back of the wheelbarrow, where it comes over against the tree. And in front of the tree. Go around the handles. I'll just go around the pumpkins back there. And again, I won't pay any attention to the little stems. If there's a pumpkin stem sticking up, you can just cut it off, because we'll put it back in again anyway. We don't need a pattern line for it. Okay, now that's got it around the wheelbarrow, so that should be pretty good for that. Be sure you get right up to the line so that you don't have a fuzzy look when you get to the edge of things. It needs to be pretty sharp right there. Okay, and then as you come up, I'm getting away from the wheelbarrow well enough that I can come in with a little bigger brush. That was my number 4 I was working with there, so I'm going to lay it down and go to my number 8, which is a little bit larger, and just more raw umber and a little bit of medium. And I'm going to go ahead and come on up the tree. Now, by putting the medium in it, see it slides along a lot easier. And in fact, you'll get some light and dark streaks that kind of add to the bark-like texture if you don't make it too thin. Working on the side of the brush instead of the whole flat of the brush. See, I'm coming in sideways, working on that, the bottom of the chisel edge. And with that little bit of medium in there, just kind of little up and down strokes. If you don't fill it in too solid with too much paint, you already see some little light and dark areas that create the look of the bark texture. We'll probably add just a little bit of highlight to it, but still that gives you some variation in color. Some of it's a little lighter, some of it's a little darker. Now on this side of the canvas, the light, which is back here in the low part of your sky, is going to hit on the right side of the tree instead of the left. So we've got that different light direction coming in to work with. So once the tree is based in, you can clean your brush, wipe it out a little bit, and I'm going to pick up just a little bit of yellow ochre and white and come in on the right side of your tree. This is with the chisel edge of the brush, and just add just a little bit of texture, additional texture, so it looks a little more bark-like. Little choppy downward strokes. When you do that bark texture, your paint's on one side of the brush, not both sides. One side, and the side that has the paint on it faces right. Faces the sun. You can come back and add just a little bit more. Okay, so after your trunk is in, then you're going to take your liner and thin down the paint. Thin it down with your turp. I use turp instead of medium because it just works better. It gives you a thinner line. Medium is a little bit thick and doesn't work quite so well. There's not really any what I would call really large limbs on this tree. They're just kind of a lot of little small, kind of little twiggy kind of things that grow up from around the tree. And you lay a liner down, it's going to make a fairly large line. And that's what you want for a lot of these limbs. Yeah, that's better. Load your liner up good. Then paint, pull out some very long limbs. We want some long ones. I've got some reaching over toward the building. I've even got some limbs kind of coming down from the top over here. But you know, kind of think of your placement when you put these in. These will not have any leaves on them, so they're just bare limbs. Like you see in the fall when most of the leaves are gone. Some trees lose their leaves earlier than others. So even though we've got lots of leaves on those trees back there, this old tree's already kicked all its leaves off. And there's more like little small, little skinny sprouts or something that's coming up here between the tree and the canvas edge. Hold your liner so you're working with it straight up. That seems to work the best for me. That's holding it straight up and getting back on the brush. Don't choke up on it because your hand's too heavy and then you can't get a good thin line. Paint pretty wet. It starts getting dry, it starts skipping. There's a whole bunch of little twiggy limbs back here toward the edge of the canvas that just kind of fills in this empty space here between the tree and the edge. Just fill it in with more little twigs and sticks and so forth. Some of them need to be thicker. You need a few heavier ones so they look like they'll hold up the thin ones. And I've probably got about enough here. Where your limbs connect to the tree, make them wider, a little heavier. Then the farther out they get away from the tree, the thinner they get. So you want to get a little heavy ones sometimes and then thinner ones sometimes, depending on where they are. If they're all skinny, they won't look like they have any base or any strength to hold themselves up. This tree here a little bit darker. Some of the main larger limbs too need to also be just a little bit darker for your composition. Enough limbs. Okay, we're going to paint the little wheelbarrow with your, I'm using my number 4 brush, a little small brush, and pick up some Payne's Gray and just enough white to make it look blue. And the side of the wheelbarrow is going to be blue. Payne's Gray and white. And it's going to be a little lighter blue toward the top and a little bit darker toward the bottom. So I'll have just a touch more white up there at the top than I've got right now. Lighter blue up here. And then as you come down toward the handlebars down there, you're going to pick up some more Payne's Gray where it will look darker. Darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. Makes it look like it's standing up. And there's a little bit of the inside of the wheelbarrow that you're seeing right over there to the left. But I'm going to leave just a tiny little edge for that light blue, so you'll see that against the tree. See, that looks like it's the inside of the barrel there. And then your light blue edge can come on around. Like so. You might see a little bit of dark in between some of those little pumpkins. I'm going to put a little bit of Payne's Gray in there where it looks like it's between the pumpkins. A few places. Shadows. Shadows between the pumpkins. Probably good enough. The handlebars are raw umber, and a little bit, there's a little bit of lighter down here where you're against the tree. I picked up a little bit of yellow ochre with the raw umber, so the handlebars would be lighter than the tree, so you can see them. Yeah, when I get back in here with my dirty brush, I'm going to pick up yellow ochre. There's a little bit right in there is the other side of the handle, the handlebar on the other side. And that's all you see of it right down there. But you're going to see a little bit of the end of the handle against the tree. So again, it needs to be a little bit lighter than the tree. So I'm using some of the yellow ochre up there with a touch of white. Okay, I've got the two sides in now, and there's a little piece that's going to go across here that's going to, you know, connect your handle. So you got to have that little piece in there, but dark. And then I'm coming in here with our little legs, and I'm going to make those light enough you can see them against the tree. So they're going to have to be mostly yellow ochre. So they've got to show up back there. And you could use a liner, or at least one to kind of tidy it up back there so you don't have a lot of bare canvas showing at little places. Pull the dark over against the legs so they'll show up. And then with your liner, you're going to have to do the wheel, and we'll try to get it as round as we can, but I can see mine right there, and I'll come around with the tip of the liner and raw umber and have some medium in it so it'll flow, or a little turp would probably even be better. But the bottom of this wheel is going to be lost in the grass, so we're not going to worry about that. And then perhaps you can see through your paint and see some of your little lines here. And then again, maybe not, but we're just going to kind of suggest them. If they're not perfect, we're not going to try to make them too perfect, because we know we'll put some grass up over them, and that camouflages things. Your wheel would be, well, let me think about that. Is the wheel in here, or is it over there? It would be inside. It would be inside these two handlebars. But it couldn't be on the other side of it. But we'll just run some lines in and maybe put just a tiny touch of white highlight on some of the little spokes. But if you put enough grass under them, we won't be worried about it too much. Just a little bit of a white edge on there too, but if you can't get a white edge on there, we're not going to be worrying about it too much. Just get enough in there, it looks like a wheel. And then I would probably take my liner at that point and pull some little tall grasses up around it so that you're camouflaging it to some degree. Thin your paint when you're doing line work like that. If you're doing grass or any kind of line work, you always want to moisten the paint with a little turp. Get it wet enough that it will mark off easy. And whatever's going to show up as far as lights and darks on this little grass, it depends on what you've got on there behind it. I'm putting a little bit of Payne's Gray in there, and then I have a little bit that was lighter too, so it can be any of those colors. And perhaps even just a little bit with the corner of the fan brush to kind of soften the grass down. More little grasses up around your wheelbarrow because it's been sitting there for a while. Then, when you get to that point, all we have left is pumpkins and any other little detail that we need to touch up. Okay, we're going to move over now and paint our pumpkins. So we're going to start with the dark side. Now these pumpkins over here are more shaded over on the right side, and that is raw sienna. These pumpkins are really not going to be hard to do. If you get the paint kind of on the right corner of the brush, and then do like a little C stroke, kind of come in, and you can pat in the dark side. I'll finish this one off, and then I wipe the brush and I pick up a little touch of orange on the left side of the brush. And it does make a difference if you have that paint on which side of the brush. If you have it on the one you're going to use, it makes a difference. And then I will paint that back side with the orange, or sometimes a little orange with a touch of white in it, because we don't want them all just too bright orange. A little bit of white in there would probably help. And these little guys, that's about all you really need to do to them. I do come in with a liner, and I want to put just a little bit of a stem on him. See, just a little bit of a stem like that. And now sometimes if you want them highlighted, you can still use your liner and come in and put just a little bit of white or lighter orange on the light side of them. With your liner, just kind of stroke it in. These little ones don't even need any section lines or anything. Some of the bigger ones I came back and did some little section lines, but that one would be done. He's just done. And let's get another one. But really they're all painted kind of the same as far as getting your light and dark values. See, this one would be again darker over there. And then wipe your brush and pick up orange and maybe a little white, or sometimes I might have even used a little bit of yellow ochre on the light side. If you want some that's not quite as orangey. And then you're going to paint the light side. And then blend it, just a few little pats will blend it where your light and dark sides touch. Put your little stem in him. If you wanted some little division lines on some of them, I did. I came in and from the stem you could, just kind of do some of those little pumpkin division lines. But, that's not essential. The only thing now we've got to watch when we get, and I'll get several of them in here, but they have to sit down. See, right now they're floating. This one is especially, because he doesn't have anything dark under him to set him down or make him look planted. He looks like he's floating up in the air. So to set him down, they need a little bit of dark under them. Watch what happens when I put some dark under him. And see, he sat down. He came back to earth. So you're gonna need to put just the ones that's sitting on the ground where you can see them. They need a little bit of shadow under them. And just kind of pat that in, and then you can do the next ones. But it's kind of probably a little easier to do that shading as you go, because some of them are like on top of each other, or kind of hard to see. It'd be hard to get the shadows in there, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, then I'll do the next one. Always start with your dark side. Dark sienna. Oops, that was November, I think. I've got the wrong color. Pumpkins are like everything else. You need light against dark. So if this one back here is lighter, you need to separate them. I'll come in with a little brighter orange right here and see if I can separate them. Okay. A little bit dark toward the bottom of them is okay too. Get that in there. Some of the little pumpkins could even sit down or lay on their side if they wanted to, if that was their desire. Highlight on that one, just to pull him away from the one behind him. Pull a little shadow out on the ground. These two at the same time. Okay, so as I'm walking around and looking at what everybody's doing, I'm seeing a lot of you aren't getting enough dark. You may be able to get that dark back in there, but it's hard to put dark colors back on top of a lot of light, because the light is wet and it just keeps picking up in the dark. But anyway, see, make sure that when all is said and done, we get enough shadow on the shadowed side to make the pumpkins look like they have a shape to them. That's our our goal is to have a light side and a dark side, and I usually always start with the dark value because it is harder to get it in on top of wet light, but not impossible, just harder. We're going to have a little Rossi in it. Now over as we get on this other side, we're going to, and get into our wheelbarrow over there, we're going to change the side of the dark. It's going to be darker on the left and lighter on the right. But if you don't have a lot of dark in there yet, you're all right.
I do.
We've got little stems on the top of these little guys. And then if I set those in the ground with a little bit of grass, that should be good enough for that side of the canvas. Little grass, little shadows coming out from the pumpkin. Sometimes I come in with just a little bit more grass in there. It just, just depends on what you feel like you need. Make everything look finished and the pumpkins kind of nestle down in the grass just a bit. And then we'll move on over and do the wheelbarrow ones and the ones under the big tree. Okay, the pumpkins that are in the wheelbarrow are going to have their light toward the top because that's where the light rays would hit them. It'd be kind of toward the top of the right side. So I'm going to put the burnt sienna on the left and underneath. So that'll separate them. That'll give them some dark value. I'll just kind of do all these at once. Get their little half moons in with the burnt sienna. Orange on the top. Orange on the top, and just barely pat it down into the dark, and that's where you're going to quit. I may have a few little areas there that I need to work some dark into, but usually you can just kind of incorporate those little areas into a pumpkin and you won't have any holes in between. We'll make our pumpkins grow just a little so we'll not have a lot of holes in between. Do have holes in between, it's just a little dark, we'll fill them up. Some of the pumpkins here on the bottom side could be just a little bit darker yet, since they're kind of really away from the shadows, away in the shadows, I should say. show on at least the top ones, perhaps. And that should do it for the pumpkins in the wheelbarrow. Which leaves 3 more on the ground. We'll move down there. Okay, we've got 2 right here, and they're also pretty dark pumpkins. These are back in behind the tree, so they don't have a lot of light on them. A lot of pumpkins here. Shadow out from the pumpkins, and then I'm going to take my little bit bigger brush here. My fan brush would be fine for that, and just kind of soften that shadow down a little bit. I think that's all the pumpkins. That's quite a few pumpkins there that we painted. Lots and lots of pumpkins. Okay. Okay, I think this is done now, so I'm going to sign my name. Always sign your name, because somebody may want it way down the line. Maybe your grandchildren or great-grandchildren would like it. You got to be sure and have your name on it.